Good morning, everyone, at the Coworking Conference in Lagos today. Thank you so much for having me here. It is an absolute privilege to be speaking at Nigeria's very first Coworking Conference. I've been hearing so much about the startup ecosystem in Nigeria over the past 2 years. So it really is a very exciting time, not only for the startup scene in the tech world, but for the co-working industry in Lagos as well. So before I talk about the global trends in the co-working industry, let me introduce myself. So my name is Leanne Beesley. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Coworker.com. We are the world's largest global platform for finding and connecting with co-working spaces around the world in 115 countries. And the reason I started Coworker was really to solve my own problem. So I've been living in Southeast Asia for about 7 years as what they call a digital nomad. So I was an entrepreneur and also a freelancer working with clients around the world. And back when I first started, there really weren't that many co-working spaces. So it was quite easy to know where to work. But then about 2 years ago, I moved to Hong Kong. And there are so many co-working spaces. And when I first got there, I wasted about 3 days trying to figure out which co-working space to work from. I was looking for one that had the international community, the startup scene, the tech kind of crowd, community events, 24-hour member access, just kind of the usual stuff that I would normally look for and find. But there were just so many to go through on Google, I couldn't figure out where to go. And then eventually my friend Celeste recommended one to me. It was called Garage Society, and it was perfect. Exactly what I was looking for. But it really bugged me that I hadn't found it online, and if she hadn't told me about it, I don't know if I would have gone there. And so I actually had no plans of starting a co-working platform, but it just bothered me so much that there wasn't something out there already. For hotels and restaurants, we have things like TripAdvisor, Agoda, Yelp, Expedia, so many different things. But for co-working, there's none. And so eventually it just bugged me enough that was like, you know what? I'm going to solve this and I'm going to build it. So I teamed up with my now co-founder, Sam Marks. We launched almost 2 years ago now. We connect tens of thousands of people every month with co-working spaces around the world. We do collaborations with journalists from Forbes.com to raise awareness of all the great co-working spaces around the world. And just lots of big things happening at the moment. So, since launching Coworker, I've spent time at hundreds of co-working spaces around the world to figure out what's working, what's not, what people are doing, how communities are built, what makes spaces different. And so that's some of the stuff that I'm going to be sharing today along with the data. So, let's jump right in. Now let's get this party started. We're going to be going through global trends in co-working, looking at some of the industry developments in the last couple of years. Then I'm going to take you under the hood of our Google Analytics to check out the Nigeria and Africa data from coworker.com, and then showing you some ideas from co-working spaces around the world. So if you are in the industry, you're running or setting up your own space in Nigeria or anywhere else, it might give you some ideas on things you can incorporate in your own space. So first of all, you are completely pioneering an entirely new industry. It is so exciting seeing this movement grow. There's so much scope for potential, so much room for growth. The statistics are crazy. I think there's very few industries that you can say are like this, and we're really helping so many people to fulfill their potential by giving them that place and space and community to thrive. So I want to say a big high five to you all for being part of this movement and making the change that is so desperately needed in the way that the world works. As you can see in this chart here, the number of co-working spaces is increasing every year, and it's really showing no signs of slowing down at all. I mean, look at this curve here. We're still ahead of the average. We're moving forward so fast. There is so much scope. In fact, supply is really struggling to keep up with demand because demand is so high. Like I said before, 41% growth of people using co-working spaces over the past year really is growing very fast. So what's actually driving this demand? Well, let's start with the growth in the TAMI sector. So this is technology, advertising, marketing, and information. And 40% of that is being driven by the technology side. Now, if you add that to the millennial generation, millennials are driving this knowledge economy. So many millennials are learning the skills that they need to be able to work remotely. So those two things combined are really pushing the number of freelancers and independent workers that are able to work from anywhere, not needing a traditional office space. Next up is the corporate bottom line. So many companies now are starting to use co-working spaces. They're shunning the old long-term office lease styles and moving into co-working spaces. Not only that, but also allowing their employees to work remotely, and those employees then go on to use co-working spaces. And this is fascinating here. American Express reported annual savings of $10 to $15 million because of their remote work options. I mean, that's a massive incentive for corporates to get involved with co-working. And then next up, we've got suburban demand. So older workers and parents of young children are starting to stay in the workforce. But they don't want long commutes. They need more flexibility than a typical office environment job would provide. So more and more companies are allowing them to work remotely, and more people are taking on it's the gig economy. They're taking on projects that allow them to work from anywhere and have that flexibility. So we've really got three types of people that are pushing this demand. We've got freelancers, we've got remote employees. So this is often a company that will allow their employees to work from anywhere. And if those employees ask, they will often pay for their co-working space membership. And then we've got companies themselves that are actually placing teams in co-working spaces. Huge growth in this sector too. I mean, so many companies are starting to use co-working spaces now with their teams. And we've got Uber, Heineken, Microsoft, so many of them. It's really quite fascinating. So next up, I'm going to talk about some industry trends. I'm going to go over these 5 elements here. Let's jump on in. First one is real estate. So what I've noticed a lot with co-working spaces, especially in the US, is that they're shifting away from the traditional lease model. So rather than the co-working spaces having a lease with the landlord, they're actually going into business with their landlord. They're partnering up with the property developer or the property owner, and they're actually doing partnerships where they do a revenue split rather than having a traditional lease. An example of this is a new space opening up in Dallas called Good Work. It's this massive warehouse that I was at recently in Texas that's being renovated. It's absolutely huge. And that's being operated by a partnership between the operator and the building owner. Next trend, co-working spaces are opening up in hotel lobbies. So Aloft Hotel in Brussels, Belgium, have opened up a co-working space in their lobby that they charge for. Not only hotels, but disused restaurants. So there's a company called Spacious in the US that is partnering with restaurants and doing kind of like pop-up co-working during the day when the restaurants are not being used. And then even in retail stores, so Staples, which is a big stationery store in the US, they've now got a co-working space inside their retail store called Work Bar. So definitely a trend here for co-working spaces in repurposed space. Now, when we look at financing methods for expansion models, I think what is extremely exciting is what I've got listed as the last one here, the management model. So we all know about the usual ones that we work with doing, lots of funding, they renovate the building, they have a long lease, delayed rent. We've got things like franchises with Serendipity Labs in the USA, but just worth noting that Impact Hub tried that a few years ago, didn't work, so let's see what happens there. But then this management model, this is fascinating. So Office, which is a big co-working space chain in India, they just raised $20 million US based on this model. WeWork have adopted this model as they move into India as well. So traditionally, like I said, they always do the long lease, they take on the renovations themselves, but they've actually brought in a third party, a real estate group in India that will be financing the renovations, and WeWork is paid a management fee. So we're definitely seeing a shift towards this managed assets model to be able to expand very quickly. It's much lower upfront cost and just lets you move faster with less capital. Next one, I'm definitely seeing a trend across the world for co-working spaces on a city level to come together, creating an association or alliance that can then work with the government to get government funding. So back in the day when co-working spaces were still pretty new, governments were throwing money at them because they knew it was a way to foster entrepreneurship, creativity, innovation in their cities. But now more and more co-working spaces are springing up. Government funding is starting to dry up. Now, the governments in many places are still willing to put money into initiatives, but they don't want to be dealing with all these different co-working space owners. They don't want to have to figure out, okay, which ones do I allocate, who do I allocate to, what's going on? And this is why these associations are working really well. For example, the Co-working South Australia Association. Definitely check them out as a model of what can be done. Okay, so a bit of fun stuff here. I'm going to take you under the hood of our Google Analytics to see what's going on in Nigeria and Africa. So here's the top 10 most popular countries in terms of searches on co-worker in Africa. You can see Nigeria is number 5. It's actually the top one in West Africa. But it's not just people within Nigeria that are looking for co-working spaces in Nigeria. We've actually got people located all over the world that are looking for co-working space in Nigeria. Here's it on a city level, and as you can see, they're really dispersed all over the world, which is pretty exciting. In most of these situations, they are expanding their company. So maybe they'll be creating a regional office in Nigeria, or they'll be sending some employees over to start a new department. That's generally why people from around the world will be looking in a different country for a co-working space. Here's the breakdown for within Nigeria itself. So as you can see, Lagos is still the most popular one. So it's people within Lagos that are searching the most. Then we've got Abuja as the second most popular. And then the other ones are very, very minuscule. So as you can see, demand is definitely still the highest in Lagos. And here's a fun little snippet of information here. You can see these are the domains of some of the companies that have been using coworker.com to look for space. So we've got foreign companies looking for space in Nigeria, local companies looking for space in Nigeria, and then also local companies in Nigeria that are looking for space outside Nigeria. So it's just interesting seeing what kind of companies are looking for space both locally and around the world. All right, as the last section of the presentation, let's go through a few ideas and trends from co-working spaces around the world. First up, co-living accommodation. This is huge with digital nomads that are traveling and they want to have everything in one place. They want to have their accommodation, they want to have their workplace, their community, all under one roof. Right now, it's really popular with digital nomads, but if co-living takes off as an independent movement with young professionals, we're definitely going to see a trend towards co-living, not just with digital nomads, but also young professionals too. Pet friendly! So I'm allergic to animals, so it never even occurred to me that bring your dog to work or bring your cat to work would be a thing, but there are so many co-working spaces around the world right now that are pet friendly. A hybrid role of receptionist meets barista. So we're seeing a trend of co-working spaces starting to, rather than relying on the free coffee, actually opening up a coffee shop inside the co-working space. And having this hybrid role of receptionist meets barista is perfect for keeping costs down while keeping that kind of welcoming feel. Somebody walks in, they can order a coffee just like a coffee shop and then be introduced to the co-working space at the same time. Mailboxes. Now, if your co-working space doesn't have virtual offices already, might be something you want to look into. So virtual offices are when you allow a company to use your co-working space as its mailing address and have mailboxes there that you put the mail into. Now, having these mailboxes can actually be a massive revenue generator for you with very little extra work. So Genius Den in Dallas is one that does this very well. There's plenty of co-working spaces out there that are using this to generate more revenue. So something to definitely look into. So rather than just having a full-time person manning the desk, you can actually do collaborations with your members. So they get a discounted membership in return for doing 1 or 2 days a week on the desk. Is a great way to get members feeling involved with your space. It's a great way for you to keep costs down. And also members are kind of the best reflection of your space. If your members are happy, then when new people come in to look around your space, your members can speak from the heart and say why they're working there, which really resonates with potential new members. It gives them, the opportunity to actually meet and mingle with the people they'd be co-working with. As more parents of young kids are deciding to stay in the workforce rather than remove themselves from it completely, co-working spaces with childcare are becoming more and more popular. Not always within the co-working space itself. Some co-working spaces have partnerships with local childcare facilities in the area, which just makes it more feasible for your members to work from your space as well as having, kids nearby. If your space doesn't have a members wall already, definitely look into doing this. So many co-working spaces around the world do it in different ways, but Polaroids are the most common. Just snap a photo of your members, pop them on the wall somehow. They can write their name on there, maybe write their company. It's a great way for your members to really feel like they're part of a community. See who else is part of the space, the movement, and just really foster that feeling of, yes, we're all here, we're all doing this together, we're all doing great things. So members wall, pop that on your radar. All right, keeping it short and sweet. That is it for now. We've run out of time, but thank you for listening. And I'm going to be live now for a Q&A if you've got any questions.